Welcome, everyone. My guest today is Travis Rosbach, the brilliant mind behind the innovative and award winning company Flask. Travis is much more than a successful entrepreneur. He's a multifaceted individual whose diverse talents and passions have propelled him to remarkable heights. In this conversation, Travis generously shares his invaluable insights into the art of branding, the power of dreaming big, and the essential qualities that define a successful entrepreneur. Get ready to be captivated by tales of spontaneity, fueled by a relentless drive for exploration and discovery. You'll come to appreciate Travis not only as a business savant, but also as a pilot, boat captain, and eternal seeker of knowledge. His story is a testament to the boundless potential that lies within each of us, waiting to be unlocked through perseverance, resourcefulness, and an unwavering commitment to excellence. Travis is a true beacon of inspiration and innovation whose journey serves as a testament to the limitless possibilities that await those brave enough to chase their dreams. Get ready to embark on a journey of discovery, enlightenment, and empowerment. Let's dive into this enriching conversation with Travis and unlock the secrets to his extraordinary success. So you're in the Bend area? Is that
I am, yeah. I'm
correct?
just outside in between Bend and Sisters in a little town called Tumalo.
Yeah, I haven't been there. I've heard nothing but good things. I lived in the Tacoma area, Olympia area of Washington for a little while.
Yeah.
So
My brother was up there. He worked at REI.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So where are you now, Ryan?
Phoenix, Arizona. Well, Scottsdale, but yeah,
Oh,
Arizona.
okay. Yeah. I like Scottsdale. I used to go see Steven Seagal. He had a bulletproof house, and I used to go hang out with him there in Scottsdale. And I lived up in Sedona for a while.
Oh, right. Didn't he sell that recently or
He
something?
did. Yeah, it sold. Yeah.
I feel like I saw something about that.
Yeah, I don't know who bought it. I should check to see who bought it. But yeah, it was always interesting. That guy is quite the character.
What was bulletproof? Just the windows or what else was unique about the house?
The doors were all like super duper reinforced, probably bulletproof also, but all the glass, there wasn't a whole lot of glass. It was a beautiful view, and all the photography I've seen, it makes it look like there's a lot of glass, but it was very well structured and thought out to where not only was the glass bulletproof, but there were a lot of structures just outside. So it was very easy to shoot out at the golf course. But it was very difficult to shoot in. There was a lot of obstructions to shoot in. And
What part of town was that? Do you remember?
It was at a private golf course. I don't remember the name of the golf course. I just remember, like, from Sedona, I would just barely. So it must have been like, I don't know, was that north side of Scottsdale? I just barely get in Scottsdale. I grew up this long road and then turn left into a golf course gated community. I think Charles Barkley lived in there also. I know he's in Scottsdale. I can't remember the name of the golf course.
Oh, well, that's interesting though.
Yeah. Yeah. It was, yeah, he was always a very curious fellow. He, he and I got along great, but whether all the allegations against him were true or not, I don't know. I never experienced that. I experienced somebody who was very anti-human trafficking, and he worked very, very diligently to make sure that the powers that be were, trying to eradicate trafficking. And I know a lot of people did not like him for that, and Hollywood ousted him for that. And we watched the Grammys or the Emmys one time, and everybody on the screen, he told me about, what they really do behind closed doors. And I didn't, it was pretty ugly. And so I could see where, he would want to go off to Russia. He asked me, he's like, hey, you should come to Russia with me. But I was like, well, I got a wife and I got stuff going on. I can't really just go off to Russia to play with Steven Seagal and Vladimir Putin. Would have been fucking cool though. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, I mean, I I think a lot of people didn't realize how big of a problem that actually is until just recently with the Sound of Freedom that came out, and then
Yeah.
different people working on the issues and the problems there, and the what Hollywood has done to even blacklist that movie and other actors that come out about it. So, how'd you end up meeting him or becoming friends?
Well, I was in Sedona at a yoga festival, and I was the only sort of, I don't know how to say this, be politically correct. I was the only masculine male in the place. The other males were maybe not quite so Travis, I guess. I don't know how. I don't know. They weren't so masculine. But all of a sudden, there's just this massive man hanging out, and he did not fit in. He was not a typical yoga dude. And the owner of the place where I was actually taking less, I was taking my, I just got done, I think, with my second yoga teacher degree certificate, whatever. And she says, Travis, would you mind finding out who this person is and either get him to leave or call the police? And I was like, yeah, sure, no problem. I don't care. So I went over and started talking. I thought he was like in some band, like the band was coming in after break or something. And he was like a band member. He had, black leather on, and he was just a big dude. And
You didn't
so
recognize him?
no, not even in the least bit, which I'm kind of embarrassed, but I didn't really watch Steven Seagal growing up. I
Yeah.
didn't really watch that kind of stuff. And so I just started talking to him, and pretty soon, I said, I found out he was there. His wife at that time, she was Mongolian, very beautiful woman. She was there, like she's right there, like I'm there with her. Like, oh, okay, cool. Like, I'm not here to give you shit. No worries. We're just making sure you're okay. See if you need anything. Not like we were here to throw you out. And so I said, anyway, I'm Travis. And he goes, oh, I'm Steven. All right, well, nice to meet you. And I turned to walk away. I'm like, oh, are you Steven Seagal? And he goes, yeah. And I said, oh gosh, I am so sorry, man. I didn't mean to fuck with you, dude. Like, I am really sorry. He goes, no, I really want to talk to you more. He goes, afterwards, can we talk? And I said, yeah, sure. And then he's like, here's my address. Just come to my house. I'm like, all right, cool. So next thing I know, I'm hanging out with Steven Seagal, and the head of the border patrol, like the main border patrol dude, and like all these famous politicians and like all the local who's who had come over, and we had a, I don't know, Emmys or Grammys party or something like that. It was wild.
That's cool. That's a good experience.
It was. Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, you ready to get going with some questions? And
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, so I'd like to really start with your journey and kind of summarize, where you started, the path that you followed, the skills that you learned and acquired along the way, up until the point where you started Hydro Flask, and then we'll get more into that. But if you could just kind of start, I believe you were scuba diving or instructing scuba diving in St. Croix. Was that right out of high school, or how old were you at that time?
It was. Yeah. So I started scuba diving about age of 14 when I first met my dad in St. Croix. And I just kept moving up. I got my rescue diver, and then my or advanced, and then rescue, and then a bunch of specialty things along the way. And then I was voted most likely to get married the day after high school, ironically enough. And 2 days later, I had not been married, and I took off to the Virgin Islands, went back down home there.
Just because you had a longtime girlfriend in high school, or there's a
Yeah,
backstory behind that?
yeah, no, I had a fairly, quite serious girlfriend for the last maybe year and a half. And, I don't know, like, I kind of figured I'd get voted like least likely to succeed, or most likely to go to prison, or, most likely to be homeless, or most likely to have to leave the country. But instead I got most likely to get married the day after high school. And I already had the plane ticket, actually, which is ironic, kind of an inside joke that No,
You
I'm
were
not.
out. You knew you were out of there, but
Yeah.
no one
Yeah.
else did.
So I went back down, moved to St. Croix full time, and got my dive master pretty quick, and did that full time, and then ended up in St. Thomas and got my dive instructor from Belongo Bay, and did that for quite a while, and always on dive boats and parasail boats. And I started traveling every summer. When it was hot in the Caribbean, the tourism would go down. And so summers were always the low season. And I'd save up throughout the winter and then take off for the summers and just go travel wherever there was water and scuba diving. And so I had a lot of time on boats, and then ended up getting my, I think I started out with a 25-ton US Merchant Marine captain's license, and then later upgraded to 50-ton. And
What
was
does that entail?
well, it was a lot of time on the water. It was, I can't remember, 120 days on the water out of the last 5 years. I can't remember the specifics, but it was time working on a vessel. And the bigger the vessel, the bigger the tonnage. And Captain Casey from the captain's school, which is now in Florida, still a very, very good friend of mine. He teaches courses on how to pass the U.S. Coast Guard, U.S. Merchant Marine captain's license test. And so I studied and studied and studied. It was the most difficult test I'd ever taken up to that point, and ended up passing finally. And I was on a yacht, which kind of was 100, I think it was 110-foot yacht that I was on the most, and that gave me the heavy weight to get my 50-ton, so a bigger captain's license.
Thanks. Do you use that license for as work or just why'd you get
Yeah.
it?
Well, yeah, you need to have it if you're going to take out anybody who is paying customers. So if you're taking out like as a day job, basically is what I had. And so especially when I lived in St. Thomas, I would either go scuba diving with low key water sports in St. John, or I would work as a captain out of St. Thomas or St. John. And yeah, just basically make my pay as a waterman, either diving or parasail boats or scuba dive boats. And then I kind of got tired of it, and I realized, like, I was kind of young. I was still in my like early 20s, and most of the people in the Virgin Islands are there to die. Like the ones that live there, they're just, no, I hate to say it, it's sad. Not all, but most are alcoholics, and they don't quite fit in with society, which I appreciate that very much. But I was just too young to spend the rest of my life in that environment. A lot of
Yeah.
debauchery, and then one day it just hit me. I quit the yacht that I was on, and walking down the gangplank, I had this like, oh shit, what am I going to do? Realization that I have no more income, and a seaplane took off out of the Christiansted Harbor in St. Croix. I was like, that's it. I'm a pilot. And so I became a pilot and started flying the seaplanes, and moved up to Florida and started flying jets for a private jet charter company.
Mhm.
And that was a lot of fun. And but I missed business. I grew up studying business. I had a fairly large book library of business books
Yeah.
while I was growing up, and I just loved business and wanted to get into business. So I quit flying and had a girlfriend at the time. We starting businesses.
Nice. So I'm a pilot, also fixed wing and rotor wing,
Oh wow.
instrument commercial. Yeah, I flew helicopters in the army.
Oh my gosh.
But seaplanes, right? What's the nuances or differences in landing on water as opposed to land?
Well, you have to really read the weather a lot more, like taking off landing at an airport. You got a big sock. You look at the sock, you look at the windmill type thing, and you listen to the radio, and the radio will tell you which direction and the altimeter and everything else. it makes it a lot easier landing on the runway. But landing in the water, you have to watch for. Well, it was what was really cool was when I was in seaplane training with a guy named Skip out of Flagler, Arizona, and we were landing right next to crocodiles. Like we, or is it alligators? What do they have in Florida? Is it alligators? Is it crocodile? Alligator. I think it's alligators. I think it is alligator.
I don't
Yeah,
remember which one.
alligator. But yeah, just landing and having to watch out for, oh, there's a log right there. No, it's just an alligator. And then sure enough, it dips under and you land right on top of where the alligator used to be. So that was always cool. But learning to watch the currents and seeing how the currents look from, up in the air was always very fascinating. I really enjoyed it. And it made a lot more sense when I was on the waters, on the, in the boat, or when I was underwater scuba diving, I could feel these currents and I would like, oh, I know what these look like. And I know if I go that way or that way, I should probably get out of it. So that was always really exciting flying passengers in seaplanes for the airline. But I also really enjoyed flying the jets. I was predominantly in a Lear 35. And then actually I did get to fly a Bell Jet Ranger helicopter. I mean, I was in the
206.
Yeah, I was in the left
Yeah.
seat. We used to fly into Mar-a-Lago, and I think that's how it's pronounced, Mar-a-Lago.
Mar-a-Lago in Florida. Yeah.
Yeah, Trump's place. We used to fly in there, and what happened was one of the captains I flew with the jets, he was also a rotary pilot, and he used to fly a big wig whose insurance said they needed 2 licensed pilots with ATPs. And so since I had my ATP, I got to fly in the left seat of the helicopter sometimes. And actually, when I lived in Australia, I worked for a guy who took helicopter license. He was taking his training, and I was on an island. And so he'd get done flying around, and then they'd drop him off, pick me up, and then I would fly back to the mainland in the helicopter. And it was all free because he was paying for it. But that's kind of where I started falling in love with aviation and flying. And I worked for a helicopter sales company in the Whitsunday Islands on the Great Barrier Reef. Daydream Island was the island. And yeah, I managed to work in sales for a helicopter company. I mean, it was just the coolest thing ever. I had so much fun.
Yeah. Helicopters are similar in that, you have to know where the wind's coming from at all times. If your engine stops, you're basically falling out of the sky. You can land it for sure, but it's a controlled crash, essentially auto rotation. So you have to constantly be aware of where you're going to land. If you're flying against the wind or with the wind or crosswind, you got to get into the wind, find a great landing spot. So yeah, but for me, I think probably similar. The learning was fulfilling and rewarding up until the point where I wasn't really learning that much anymore. And then it just became boring and mundane and not fulfilling. And that's kind of when I realized I need to be doing something else, because I was going to hurt myself or someone else, and I just wasn't, super happy doing what I was doing anymore. So is that kind of similar to how you ended up going back to business?
It absolutely was. Yeah. I had made a list. Like at first, the only thing I really wanted to do was fly for the seaplane for the airlines. I just want to fly the seaplanes. And that happened fairly quickly after I got my license, after I got my ATP. And so then I started making a new list of all the planes and all the jets I wanted to fly. And moving to Florida, I had access to a lot of different jets. And once I started checking off those boxes, I'd get back in the Lear and we'd do a 3-hour hop up here or down there or over there. And you're really just up there pushing buttons, talking on the radio, trying not to fall asleep. And, getting into the hotel, and it's the exact same hotel you've stayed in 100,000 times and the same people. It kind of became Groundhog Day. Yeah. And same restaurants, same salad, same steak, same, even though it was so radically different. Like I got to get a rental car and go check out the museums and go check out the concerts and go check out the sights and sounds of each city. But after a while, it kind of, it just wasn't fulfilling anymore. It was kind of, I wasn't necessarily lonely, but I was all by myself out. Usually the person I'd fly with would stay back at the hotel. So I'd have the rental
Yeah.
car by myself. And I was like, this is kind of boring, actually,
Yeah.
and met a lot of really cool people, a lot of, celebrities and athletes and a lot of business people. And I found that when I was flying the really, really wealthy, uh, predominantly business people, especially, I had more fun talking to them than I did flying the plane, like I
Yeah.
was interested in how did you make your billion? How did you do this? How did you do that? Why did you do this? Where did you do that? And so I had that calling to just get into business. And so finally I was like, they kind of started messing with me with my pay and my time off. And I was like, I'm not going to take that. I'm done. I don't want to
Yeah.
play the reindeer games. And then moved to Oregon, moved back home to Oregon, and started a fence company. Was the real sort of actual big business that I started. I had a girlfriend at the time, and we started a fence company. So,
What did you have some kind of background in that prior or growing up, or
no,
where'd that
none
come from?
whatsoever. No. Well, we just got back. I mean, it was literally second night back in Bend. She'd never been to Bend before, and we just rented a house, and we were just hanging out, drinking a bottle of wine, and all of a sudden, some guy pulls up out front and does a beeline to the backyard. So I go ran, grab the gun, get all ready to go, like who's, because I've been living in the Virgin Islands and pretty shady parts of the country at that point. So I'm thinking we got a situation. Come to find out, he was a fencer. He was putting these metal pipes in the ground to build fences that had no knots. It was clear cedar. And I was like, first of all, why metal? Second of all, why is the wood so beautiful? Why don't all the other fences look like this? And, uh, so he kind of explained the whole situation, why he was doing this and what this is, and, all of that and how he was different. And this was about 2005, 2006, when the housing economy was just booming in Bend, especially. And
Mhm.
I said, so you're doing all these, subdivisions, I assume. And he's like, no, I just do one house at a time. I was like, well, why didn't you do all the subdivisions? He's like, well, because then I'd have to have a big company and a bunch of employees. And I was like, well, so do you mind if I do that? He's like, yeah, sure. Go ahead. You do that. I was like, okay, what'd you say those nails were again? He wrote down their aluminum nails and their ring shank. And, like I wrote down every single note that I could from him. I think he was, just thought I was delusional or crazy or kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure enough, we took and the little bit of savings that we had, and we bought a couple trucks, a couple trailers, and went to the fence supply place up in Portland, and just said, "Hey, what do we need to start a fence company?" The guy is like, "Well, what do you have?" I'm like, "Well, we got a trailer to put the shit in, but what do we need to put in the trailer?" And so he walked around and showed us, well, you need one of these. How many employees do you have? None, but let's say four. He's like, okay, four of those, four of those. And we just filled up the trailer and came back and got on Craigslist and hired some like random people who claimed to know fencing and started a fence company.
How much rain does Bend get? Because
Not as much as the Valley.
yeah, because I have a house in Olympia, Washington, and I've replaced that fence so many times because they use wooden fences and it just
Yeah.
rains constantly and they just rot out and you got to replace them all the time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Those pressure treated 4x4s, oh, they're pressure treated. They'll last forever. How many times I've heard that? Then how many times you see a fence fall over and you go, how long did your forever 4x4 pressure treated take, last? But yeah, you put in metal and it does last for damn near ever. And wrapping boxes over you can't see the metal. It just looks like a regular wooden fence. Clear cedar, so there was no knots. And pretty soon we were doing all the big subdivisions all over town, and we had 25 guys and a pretty major fence company.
So how long did that last?
That was a couple of years. I think we had that about 2.5 years total from the time we started to finally it was February. Yeah, the second February, and I was freezing. And, we have a lot of lava rock here in Bend, and digging holes isn't fun and it's very difficult. Pouring concrete, and, it's 6 degrees outside. It was awful. And I called my partner and I told her, I said, "Hey, look, I'm going to kill myself or kill somebody else. I got to get out of here. I got to go somewhere warm and just warm up a little bit." I said, "Mexico or Hawaii, either one, I got to go." And about an hour later, she said, "Come home quick. You got to get your bag and go to Portland," because Redmond Airport hadn't really taken off at that point. So I came home, got my bag, and took off. And I said, "Where am I going?" She said, "Hawaii." I said, "All right, cool. What does that mean?" She said, "Oh, it's called Oahu, and that you're going to Honolulu." I said, "All right, whatever that is." Okay, cool. I'd never been. And got there. And as soon as we landed, I was like, "I'm home. This is where I live." And they opened the door and I could feel the aloha. And I was like, "I'm done. I live here now." So I called her and told her, and I said, "Hey, look, you can either keep the company or you can sell it. But either way, I live in Honolulu. I live in Oahu." So we sold the company and she moved with me, and we ended up back over in Honolulu or Hawaii Kai, about 3 months later. So
Nice.
I lived in Hawaii then, sold the company.
I love it. Very um what's the word? Um Spontaneous.
Yeah. 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 I just knew that, like, I just love being warm, and I love that aloha. And I could feel it. And it felt like living in the Virgin Islands, but a lot safer. There wasn't the threat of guns and machetes, major death violence that was kind of always a factor of being in the Virgin Islands. And originally, I started out as a business broker, so I got my Hawaii real estate license. And uh, the guy I was working for kind of had a racket where all the marketing went to him and his phone number, and it just wasn't a good deal for me.
Mm.
So got out of that, started selling exotic luxury pre-owned vehicles, and that quickly turned out not to be for me. About a month, 34 days actually. And
Luxury pre-owned vehicles in Hawaii.
yeah, yeah, which is, it was kind of cool because there was all these, like, high end McLarens and Bentleys and
Hmm.
Jaguar, and, all these. I don't think we had a Lambo at that point, a couple Ferraris, but I could see them be sold, and I could see them be worked on the day before and the weeks before. They're out back getting worked on, and then they get put in the showroom, and it's just like, you're buying a limit. Like, I couldn't ethically sell something
Yeah.
that I knew wasn't right. So I sold one vehicle, and I felt horrible about it. It was an Impala to this big local guy, and I felt terrible. So I quit and got into printing. I had a I had a fascination with screen printing and embroidery and making signs. And there were a lot of just real basic signs on the side of the roads all over Oahu that said, signs and banners, and different people advertising these businesses. Pretty soon I started seeing them everywhere. Like, wow, everybody and their cousin owns a sign shop in Hawaii, and such huge competition. I want to do that. For some reason, I was like, I just want to go toe to toe with the
Because
people.
you saw an opportunity to do it better, or you or had some other
I,
interest.
I didn't even know. I just thought, how competitive. Like, this has got to be one of the most competitive things to do. And being a Howley, like, imagine if I could break into the Hawaiian culture as a sign guy. Like, if I could do that, I could almost do anything. And so it kind of started out as a
What's the term you used? Howley?
Howley, a white guy, like, from the mainland.
Oh, I didn't. I've only been there once. I didn't hear that term.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's good, because how they go home isn't always, what you want to hear. And so we took off. We sold had sold the fence company. So we joined an association, the, sign makers in America or whatever it is, took off to Orlando and found the guy who seemed to be the most, well known. And he was kind of a rock star in the sign world. And uh, went up to him and said, "Hey, I need to buy a sign company. Will you sell it to me?" And like, what do I need? And it was the same thing. Like, how many customers do you have? How many employees do you have? Like, none. We haven't started, but
Hmm.
let's say four employees. Okay, you need four of those. You need four of those. You need now. What's that again? And so we came home and had a big 64-inch printer, and we could make signs better than anybody else on the island, sure enough. And pretty soon we moved into this really nice storefront downtown Honolulu, and had a lot of MMA fighters. That was just starting to take off at that time. And we got into that crowd and started helping build the brand around the fighters. And not only would we do posters and t-shirts, but we helped them with, the color palettes and the logos and all that. Like, it was really neat. It was a nice uh, kind of a segue into Hydro Flask, where we were really working on brands and we could see what was working and what was not working. And then yeah, did that for a couple 3 years.
So you, and then Hydro Flask was next, or what led you to get out of it and start
Yeah.
the next thing?
Well, I had I had multiple Nalgene water bottles when I worked, when I was in flight school. I worked at, when I guess they call that college. Um, I worked at a rock climbing store and had always had Nalgene water bottles. And so uh, one day I was thirsty. I was downtown Waikiki area, and I went into the sporting goods store and said, "Hey, I need to get a water bottle. I'm thirsty and I'm tired of using the single use plastic." And the guy says, "No, we don't have any." And I said, "Oh, come on. Like, I know you got water bottles." He's like, "Nah." So they take me back and show me this entire wall was empty. There was like maybe three water bottles on it. The whole wall, the entire wall, all the shelves were empty. And I said, "What happened?" And he said, "Well, there was this article in the French newspaper about this stuff called BPA, and the owner is French, and she just so happened to see it. And it's a preliminary measure. She decided to pull all the water bottles."
Oh,
I was
really?
like,
She pulled all the Nalgene's from those
"Yeah,
stores?
yeah." And I was like, "Well, who's going to fill up the shelves?" And they said, "Nobody. There's nobody else to do that. There's nobody else making water bottles." And it hit me in the back of my mouth. And Ryan, it came out my mouth, or the back of my head, and it came out my mouth. And I was like, I will do that. And the guy just like kind of like laughed at me. But I saw the future. I saw about 10 years in the future where I was standing on stage talking about this highly successful water bottle company. And it was like kind of a weird thing. And I just knew that that was going to be what would happen. And next thing I know, it like I had a pretty major water bottle company.
So how, so you had the idea, and then obviously Hydro Flask has some technology, I think, that hasn't been used in the past, right? As far as vacuum chamber sealed. Is that, can you talk more about that?
Yeah. So what happened was, so that I got back to the sign shop, and I asked the couple employees that were there. I was like, "Well, who makes water bottles? Like, what's the best water bottle?" And the first person said, "There's a company that makes aluminum water bottles. You got to go get it." I said, "All right, cool." So I go to get it. I couldn't fit my ice cubes in it. It didn't stay cold. I came back, and I'd into Oregon. I'd hike up a mountain, and it would freeze, and I'd have no water when I got to the top. I'd go out surf in Hawaii, and I'd get back to the beach, and it was too hot for me to drink, and it sucked, and it dented easily, and the stuff inside, this gold stuff, flaked off. And then I found another one that was a single wall metal. And I was a little bit more excited because I could fit ice cubes in it, but same thing, it'd freeze and it'd get too hot and it wasn't ergonomically correct. And so it just like dribbled all over my shirt. And so I remembered my grandpa had an old thermos that was double wall insulated. It was glass on the inside and metal on the outside. I was like, well, why can't we just do metal and metal? And instead of making it 850 pounds and just like this stupid old school thing, why don't we just make a bottle that people can actually drink out of with the mouth size that actually works and, like ergonomically correct? And so I started buying a bunch of plastic bottles and glass bottles, and I just started collecting bottles and drinking out of them and seeing which ones I liked the flow rate and which ones I liked the lip of and which one I liked the lid of and um, you know, juice bottles and pop bottles and beer bottles. And I just started like drawing up what I thought would be a pretty cool design. And we had a client at the sign company who would go to China to the Canton Fair, and he had helped people find factories to work with. And I asked him, I was like, hey, man, can I go to the Canton Fair with you? And I want to do this double wall vacuum insulated water bottle. He's like, nah, that's stupid. Nobody's doing that. You can't come with. I said, no, come on. I'll pay you, and we'll just go. You just take me over and I can find them. He's like, no, it does not exist. That's a stupid idea. You cannot be a client of mine. And I was like, dang, like that sucks. And so I sold my moped and my girlfriend's moped and a couple longboards that we had. And I got the money and I took off so I sold everything and found a company who said that they could do it. And in Shanghai. So I took off to Shanghai and get to the factory. And I was like, hey, let's rock. Let's do these double wall vacuum insulated stainless steel water bottles. And they're like, no, we do plastic water bottles. I said, no, it says on the facts right here, you said you can do an insulated bottle. Like, no, we do plastic. And so at that point, I got kind of desperate, but I was like, well, I guess not really desperate. I got more like hopeless. I sold all this stuff and I really had this great idea. And sure enough, the guy from Hawaii was right. Nobody's doing this. And just as I was leaving, somebody came up, grabbed my arm and says, hey man, I got this cousin down in Hangzhou that might be able to help you. So next thing I know, I'm on a train, I'm in Hangzhou and meet this guy, Michael, and his wife, Natalie. And the next day we were down looking for factories. And about 2 weeks later, we finally found a factory that said that they'd give it a shot. And so I went back home to Hawaii and we closed down the sign company and sold everything we had and bought the first round of Hydro Flasks.
So you didn't even have a prototype at this point? Do you?
Well, we did. Yeah. We first ended up, we first got 2 prototypes and it happened so quickly because I got home and we just started selling everything. And next thing we know that like we get these 2 bottles in the mail and took them out for a photo shoot, and everybody who tried them or held them loved them and didn't want to give them back. And we're like, yep, this is going to work. This is cool. And so, yeah, we sold the rest of everything we owned and got the first, we ordered, I think it was 1,000 was the minimum order quantity. And by the time they were ready, we could only afford 1,500. So we started out with 1,500 and just took off to the races at that point.
Do you own the patent on that technology or?
Yeah. So the technology of the insulation has been around for, I don't know, 100 years or whatever. Okay. Stanley, I think the guy's surname was Stanley. And he actually invented the vacuum flask, the vacuum insulated contraption. And so we didn't have utility patents, but we had design patents. So like for the size of the mouth, the size of the bottle, the shapes and things like that.
So then where you have 1,500 hydro flasks, right? Is it named hydro flask at this point?
Yeah, yeah.
And
They right before we got the first samples, we were trying and trying desperately for months to figure out a name. And all of our friends, all of our family, everybody we knew was like, "Hey, what's the name of the water bottle company?" Every day we're trying to figure it out. And then finally the factory calls and it's like, "Hey, we need a name so that we can screen print the logo on the samples." And my brother came up with Hydro Flask, and I hated it. I said, "No, I hate the word flask. It reminds me of whiskey, and I hate whiskey. I had a bad experience when I was 15, and it reminds me of homeless people under the Burnside Bridge." And he's like, "Well, where are you going to sell them?" "Well, under the Burnside Bridge at the Saturday market." And he's like, "There you go." So sure enough, we put Hydro Flask on the first samples, and the name just stuck and it grew on us, and we had nothing but positive feedback. It was, kind of self-explanatory as to what it is. And it became catchy, sticky.
then how can we talk about brand and scaling and how that what that looked like for Hydro Flask? Like from that point on, what happened?
Well, so I originally the furthest thing I could think of was this Portland Saturday market under the Burnside Bridge, and we'd go up there on the weekends and we'd sell it in the summertime, and we'd make some cash and we'd buy more bottles and we'd pay rent, we'd buy some food, and we'd just have this little water bottle company. And yet we also had all the experience of building these big brands in Oahu for the MMA fighters and for other big companies and other small startups that then became big. And so it was very easy for us to draw parallels from, like, BJ Penn and some of these, not that we built out his whole entire campaign, but like some of these big campaigns that we'd worked on. And how did we do that? Well, table throws and vinyl and banners and tents and business cards and brochures. And so all of that was just very easy for us to have. So we sort of had all the collateral, all the marketing stuff figured out. And so when we showed up to the first day of the Saturday market, the lady said, "No, you can't sell that. You can't sell water in here. The elephant ear guy sells Pepsi products and they sell water." Like, "No, no, no, we're not selling water. It's just the bottle." She's like, "No, he's selling water. You can't sell water." "No, it's just bottles, I swear." And she's like, "No, that's stupid." But she did let us go out to the railroad tracks and set up. And so we set up a booth on the railroad tracks and like just started selling water bottles. And the first weekend, I think we sold, I don't know, like maybe 30 or so. I don't remember the exact number. And then the second week, people came back to buy more. And when they came back to buy more, it was like just further validation that this was probably going to work. And that's how it really took off.
And how'd you go from that to getting into stores and, you know, did you start on online or other places, many different distributors, retailers?
Well, so after um after about, I don't know, 2 months or so of selling up at the Portland Saturday market, the Bend area had downtown Bend had what's called Munch and Music, and it's like music in the park on Thursday night or whatever it is. And a guy came up from the local newspaper, the Bulletin, and he's like, "Hey, it's kind of slow, not much going on. Are you guys new business?" And, "Yeah, yeah, we're new. And can I do an article?" "Yeah, yeah, whatever." And he's like, "Okay, cool." So he writes an article and we completely forgot about it. But the following week, a guy came up and he's like, "Hey, I saw you in the paper." I was like, "Oh yeah, did that come out?" He's like, "Yeah, it was a pretty good article. I'm a sales rep. I was wondering if I could sell your bottles." And I knew what sales reps were from the scuba diving days, but I didn't really fully comprehend, because we always bought from the sales reps. I never gave to a sales rep for him to go out and sell. So it's kind of bass backwards proposition for my head to wrap around. But we ended up giving him like 24 bottles for free just to see what he could do, which was very scary. And that was on Thursday. Monday, he called and says, "Hey, how many bottles do you have left?" And we told him the number, and he's like, "Those are mine. I have them sold." And we're like, "Oh, gosh. Okay. Well, I guess, we'll have to get the other 1,500 bottles coming in from China." So we got those on the boat. And by the time they got here, he had already sold them and I had sold them. I just would take the bottles to the local retail stores. I went into Whole Foods and said, "Hey, I got your bottle." They're like, "Great." And so that, we were in Whole Foods and it just started snowballing and compounding like that. And then we started going to trade shows, and those were phenomenal for us. They were really, really good. The main thing that we got at trade shows were other sales reps from other regions, the East Coast and the Midwest. And, you know, uh, uh, there was a guy in South Korea and there was a guy in Nepal. And, so we started picking up international accounts and also sales reps at these trade shows. And then we'd go back to the next trade show and our sales rep would introduce us to some big mucka mucka at some big mucka mucka company. And we had the big account, like that. And it had us just start ordering more and more and more and more.
Was there I guess, a need to educate the buyers on why this is a better product? I mean, I guess BPA's helped you out a lot, right? Because now people don't want to drink out of plastic bottles. You have a metal option, but it's also, it keeps your drink hot or cold, right? So was that a big kind of process of educating the customer base?
Yes and no. I think that the average person on the street got it pretty quick. I don't think that they quite understood how cool it could be when they could put their cold water in it with ice cubes. And then it was fairly easy to rinse out and put cold or hot coffee in it. And you don't taste the coffee, you don't taste the orange juice, you don't taste the beer, whatever it was, until they started using it. But the buyers at the big stores got it pretty quickly. And they were always a little bit skeptical of the 12 hours hot and 24 hours cold. They'd never seen that before. That was new, but they were good looking. We had a bunch of different colors that, were not the standard sort of outdoor color palette. And so we'd just give them a bottle or we'd sell them a couple cases to start with. And, it's the same thing. They would get them to their stores, put them on the shelves. People would buy them once because we had a lifetime warranty, not a lot to lose. They'd take them home, they'd try them, it would work. Their husbands or kids or their spouse would steal them. And then all of a sudden, now they're down their own bottle, plus they need three more. So they'd come back and buy three more. And then they'd go to work and tell their friends or go to school and tell their friends. And pretty soon that store was selling nine more, and the orders just started picking up exponentially, really.
You talk a little bit more about your branding philosophy, because for me, I think branding literally came from branding cattle, right? And it's intended to change the behavior of the person who sees that. So your neighbor sees your cow and it's branded yours, and he either gives it back, or if he doesn't like you, he does something else with it. But can you talk a little bit more about what that means to you?
Yeah, I love that, and I love the fact that that. Because that's when I think about branding, and I living in the West, and I have a brand for our property, and it is, and for the fence company, I had a brand made. So we'd get done with the fence and we'd put the metal sign up so everybody could see it as marketing. But we actually had a physical brand. We would brand one of like it's a custom branded fence. And so I've always been very fascinated with branding. And I believe you could take a horrible product and make it a big seller just based on on branding. We've seen that a lot. But if you have a really good product and you don't brand it properly, well, then nobody's going to know it about it and you're not going to sell it and it's all going to be for naught. And so I knew we had a good product and I knew that people were feeling better about themselves and they were feeling healthier and they were keeping plastic out of the ocean. And so we were doing good. And so I wanted to create a brand that reflected this happy, healthy lifestyle that you're kind of coming into if you're not already. And so with the branding, I always believe in consistency uh, the H guy was always, the same Pantone colors, the same size on the same, ratios. And we had all that figured out pretty quickly. And then uh, I'm not, I'm a little embarrassed, but I studied cults and how do cult leaders get you to drink their Kool-Aid? And how do you know if you're in a cult? And why would you want to be in a cult? What are some of the benefits of being a cult? And there's a little bit of that mixed in, because I'm not trying to sell you, acid or strychnine laced Kool-Aid. I'm trying to sell you a bottle that you can drink water out of and feel better. So, I did it with a clear conscience, but how do you build that cult following of a brand for a product? And I studied and studied and studied that for years before Hydro Flask. And then by the time I got Hydro Flask, I kind of got to experiment and play with it and test the waters a little bit.
Yeah. So it's not entirely about the product. It's about being part of a community, about being part of something bigger than yourself, or, um, you know, seeing yourself in a way that you would like others to see you. Right.
Absolutely. And the price of the bottle has always been, it's more expensive than just buying a gas station water bottle and a single use plastic. You have to put some thought into this and you have to kind of take care of it because it's expensive and you want it to last. You want it to be of high quality. But then it very quickly became like a fashion accessory and we had a bunch of cool colors. And so, people would kind of start out with silver and black. And then next thing you know, they're getting hot pink and bright blue and fuchsia. And it was affordable luxury kind of. It's like I don't have a $6,000 handbag, but I do have a water bottle that I carry with me that shows that I spent some money for it and I care about the environment. I care about my health. I care about fashion and style. And all of that is wrapped up in what's seemingly just a water bottle, but it was so much more. It was really it was a badge of honor
There's
to
a
carry.
piece of exclusivity about it in a way. Right.
Yes. Yes.
So what led to the exit?
Well, just kind of like everything else in my life, after about 4 or 5 years, I just kind of, I don't know, the season's up and I kind of cap out. I've reached the ceiling and, people say, oh, well, we could extend the roof for you or we could put a skylight in so you could go even higher. And I'm like, nah, I've reached the max. And I'd gone through a lot of personal uh, tribulations right around the time that I decided to finally exit. And I was ready to just go on and start new chapters and go find new places to explore.
I feel like you're real similar to me in that I get fulfillment, out of the creative process, building something. And then when it comes to maybe scaling or leading something bigger, I'm just not as interested, right? I want to go on and build the next thing. So
I find a lot of thrill in the initial startup. And there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of things are breaking, and it's kind of like living in a video game. But then once you have everything a little bit more on autopilot, I tend to get bored. It's a lot like flying airplanes. Like at
yeah,
first, hurtling through space that fast and coming into land with people in the back and trying not to kill everybody, and you're going so fast, and you're trying not to screw up anything. And then once you land and you're on the ground going, okay, cool. Everybody's still alive. We can fly the plane again next time. And this is pretty cool. Well, over and over and over again, the monotony really started to get to me. And once we started, once we had REI, that was always like the pinnacle brand to the store to get into. And once
Yeah.
we had REI and Dick's and Cabela's and Sportsman's and Whole Foods and all of those, and we were international and we're cranking out 120,000 bottles a month. Now what do I do? Like I can only go to so many trade shows. I can only go to the factory so many times. I can only go to, these meetings and stuff. And yeah, I just ready for the next adventure.
What are your thoughts on what Stanley's done recently, the recent years?
I have a lot of opinion about them. I don't like Stanley. I have a Stanley cup, not the, I have a Stanley like tumbler, I guess. I don't know what it's called. I guess it's called a tumbler. It's a stein. That's what I'm trying to say. It's like a beer stein that I drink my coffee out of. And I like it. But Stanley themselves, I don't have a lot of good things to say about them. They tried to, steal from me and take, our idea. They tried to steal a model from me early on, and they were going to cut it open and reverse engineer it. And they kind of did. And I don't really like that. And then they fell away. They haven't really been relevant up until the Stanley Cup. And what's really ironic is I was in China last month, I guess it was, or January, right when it came out that they had lead in the Stanley Cup. And it was amazing timing, Ryan, but I was literally driving through the new area. They have five new buildings of factories that they just built. And I was literally right there when I got past the phone that showed the CNN article that Stanley's got lead. And I thought, yeah, I know exactly why you have lead. I know where the lead is. I know how that happened. And I know, like I don't know. I don't know. I have a lot of thoughts about them. I think it's brilliant what they did. They brought the guy in from Crocs who revitalized Crocs when it was dead by signing Post Malone for a collaboration with Croc. And then he went over to Stanley and did the same thing, did a couple very key collaborations with some people, and they started selling pink cups and it took off like wildfire.
Yeah. So as an entrepreneur, right, my perspective is that, it's an entrepreneur is someone that is a skill collector, builder, right? I have a lot of different skills. I've worked in aviation maintenance. I've been a pilot. Built up a lot of different skills and licenses and this and that. I consider myself a generalist and not a master really of anything, because I don't focus long enough on one thing to become a master of something. So can you talk a little bit about your journey, throughout the years from scuba diving to being a pilot to a boat captain, all the skills that you built up that then helped you in your, more successful endeavors later in life?
I think one of the first things that I really learned when I got into scuba diving, when I turned 18, so I grew up with a stepdad who was ex-Vietnam vet with Agent Orange and cocaine and heroin and alcohol. And it was pretty gnarly growing up. Then when he was gone, it was just my mom on her own and I was just by myself. So when I turned 18 and moved to the Virgin Islands, I quickly realized that nobody's here to save me. Like nobody's here to help. And when I became a boat captain, I'd be out on the boat and I'd have divers in the water and the engine wouldn't start, or, something would happen where I learned that if you're going to get everybody back safely, it's on you, Travis. There's nobody. You can't call AAA. You can't call your mom. Santa Claus isn't coming. Nobody's coming to help you get out of this situation. You need to fix it. You need to fix it right now. And going through that situation with boats, especially that wouldn't start, or they would, the prop would get fouled, or whatever the situation would be, getting my divers back to shore safely was always, it was a low lying stressor that I had. And then flying, same thing. I flew through the Bermuda Triangle and the compass went out, the GPS went out, everything went out flying through the. No, I was all by myself in this plane that the right engine kept going out. And I was like, well, first of all, if you're going to get to Fort Lauderdale, nobody else is going to get you there. And second of all, if you do crash, where, like with your helicopters, like where are you going to crash? How are you going to survive after you crash? So I'd open the door and get ready to crash because the plane's going down, so having that, nobody's shooting at us, when in business. And so having that, the engine's not on fire, nobody's shooting at us, nobody's life is at risk or in danger. It's just that the UPS guy is an hour late, or it's not happening today, it's happening next week. We're a week delayed. Everybody's alive. And so that has always been something that, like, now that I'm doing consulting, I always try to remind my clients that we're going to live. Your clients are going to live. Your customers are going to be just as happy next week as they would have been today. And I think that not panicking in potentially dangerous situations or chaotic situations is probably some of the best advice I have received and I like to give.
Yeah, responding, not reacting, right? Because the reaction is, just what your physiology will tell you to do in that situation, which is fight or flight. But the responding in a appropriate and controlled way. I mean, I've listened to helicopter crashes where both the pilots are talking calmly all the way down to the ground and until they're not, right? And that's what you have to do in that situation. Whereas, like, my wife drop something and scream and just scare the hell out of me. Like, can we please just respond like differently than that? You
Yeah.
got to be calm and focused in order to make good decisions. When you're emotional, that's when you're making decisions based on emotions. It's not clearly thought out or even rational most of the time, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I have a daughter, and anytime something happens, the first thing I ask her is, what are we not going to do? Panic. You're right. Okay. We're not going to panic. So what's the next thing we're going to do? Like with flying, one of the first things I learned was, if you have an emergency, what do? You take a deep breath, you take a sip of coffee, then you grab the checklist, then you start reading the checklist. But you don't just start pulling levers, you don't start flipping knobs and turning things. You take a breath, take a sip of coffee, grab the checklist, start at number one. And just that few seconds to just calm down, do something that calms you even more. You're now thinking, you're now breathing, hopefully. And step one, is the engine on fire? Yes. Step two, which engine's on fire? Identify which engine. Okay. Now, which levers? The right engine. Okay. So, like, I can't always have those checklists in real life, but I can always start with, okay, what am I not going to do? I'm not going to panic. So what does that mean? Okay, well, it means that I'm going to think about it and do something that hopefully makes sense, and the package will get there on time, or at least as soon as possible.
Yeah, there's a saying I learned in skydiving: smooth is slow is smooth and smooth is fast, right? So
Yeah.
that's same
Yeah.
thing we're talking about is life and death situation. Panicking is the last, the worst response you can have. So
One of
I've
my
always just
favorite. Also, go ahead. Yeah.
I just always remembered that saying from that time. Is
Yeah. Yeah. One of my favorite sayings was from The Right Stuff, where he says, like, if an aviator would get in trouble, he'd say, I've tried A, I've tried B, I've tried C. And what do I do as he's crashing, as he's on his way down to auger? And the other pilots would come on and say, "Shut up and auger like a man," and or shut up and auger like an aviator. It's like if you try A, you try B, you try C, it doesn't work. Well, you just talk yourself all the way into the ground, like you said. But um, yeah, I firmly believe that with business, keeping a calm, cool head about yourself is detrimental to, I mean, or it can be, is detrimental to the right. It's imperative. It's imperative to stay calm, because in 5 years, in 5 minutes, in 5 days, this probably won't even matter anyway.
Yeah. And then obviously with starting new businesses, there's different stages, right? At first stage, you need skills to do whatever that is. And next stage, can you kind of talk about that and what that means to you?
Yeah, I think, in the early stages, I read a lot of uh, the for dummies guides and the idiots guides, and just learning the terminology of marketing, of branding, of sales, of negotiation. There's so many roles that you have to wear, or hats you have to wear as an entrepreneur in a startup, and you have to do it on your own. It's difficult to hire people if you don't have money, and a lot of the startups don't have money. And so Google, YouTube, AI. Nowadays, there's Chat GPT that you can ask these esoteric questions to. But you have to really know enough to get by. And then as the company grows and you just naturally start making money, you can just naturally start hiring people. And we found that we'd hire people that we could afford. And they weren't necessarily the best, and they weren't necessarily good, but they were at least a warm body and they were filling a role. As we started getting a little bit more money, we could hire people that were actually doing sales, or, they had a history of marketing, or they had a history of online retail. And you still have to know enough about the subject matter to kind of watch to make sure that they're doing the right thing. But you have to also very much trust. That's the other thing. It's like, after you've been doing something as a startup yourself for so long, it can be very difficult to bring in an outside third party and say, "Hey, I trust you with the social media campaign." No, that's scary, at first. And then, trial and error, and, you win some and you lose some, and you see what works and you average it out. And then it starts getting easier and easier. And then pretty soon you hire people that are so dang good at the online marketing campaign that they're teaching you more stuff. And it's just a constant learning that another reason why I really like doing business is because I'm always learning. There's always some new SEO thing, or there's some new marketing campaign funnel thing that just is now better than the last. And I try not to chase those rabbits, but at the same time, you still got to learn about them.
Well, especially now more than ever, right? Like if you're not keeping up with technology, you're irrelevant really quickly these days. And I mean, marketing and everything online is changing so quickly. So you gotta learn to stay up with it. That's kind of the bottom line.
You're absolutely right, and it's a constant. I mean, we're bombarded with so much, all directions that we turn. It's not just the mainstream media anymore. It's constant social media. Now we've gone from 2-hour movies down to half-hour sitcoms, down to 10-minute YouTube, down to 10-second TikToks. And even TikTok, I find myself pushing the button to make it go twice as fast. And I lose interest and scroll and scroll and scroll. And so it's a dynamic time to be in business, because there's just so much competition for people's time and interest. How do you possibly get somebody to spend 10 seconds watching your commercial on TikTok, when we used to be able to make 2-minute radio commercials or 3-minute commercials for the TV. We don't have that luxury anymore. Now we're down to TikTok in 10 seconds. And if you don't get somebody's attention within 0.04 seconds, you've lost them. And it's very dynamic time that we live in. And technology, it's hurting us, but it's also helping us. It's hurting us in the fact that there's so much of it and we have to constantly keep up with it. And yet it's helping us that we now need less people. Instead of having a marketing department with 15 people, we could probably get away with 3 and a really robust AI program to run the majority of it. It's kind of exciting though.
Yeah, and with technology, I love technology. I've paid attention to it for a while. Like I'm interested in what's coming out, right? New technology, but I've gotten to a point where I'm like, okay, this is really cool, but how is someone going to leverage this to try to hurt me, right? Like with Neuralink, right? Elon Musk, it's super cool technology, but I don't know. Someone's going to manipulate it and be able to control it and do some bad stuff with it. I have to assume at this point. How does that resonate with you?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I feel the same. Like uh, the electric vehicles that can drive themselves and they can crash and block all of our exits on the highways. I just saw a
Sure.
thing about was it the day after tomorrow or the world ends, whatever that movie is on Netflix. I saw a thing on it where they showed all the driverless electric vehicles are just going to crash and block us and trap us in these 15-minute cities. I try not to get terrified about that stuff, but I
Or
think it,
yeah, they run your information and you've got a warrant and the door's locked and the car drives you to the police station.
yeah, yeah, delivers you right to it, and I just, like I said, I just got back from China and they've been so advanced for a long time now. They're so far ahead of us when it comes to technology. Or I say ahead. What I really mean is they use a lot of technology that we do not use. And there were times where I'd be at the train station and my pass wouldn't let me go through the gate. And it's like, nope, nope, we don't like you going through this gate. We're just going to lock you in. It's like the computer says no, you can't leave the train station, Travis. And I think, gosh, like what if this was a thing, like, oh, you've used all your carbon credits. You can't buy any more meat. Sorry, Travis.
Uh,
The computer says no. Or, oh
yeah,
no, Trav, you have a parking ticket and you'd never paid from 1989. And so, off to the clink, we're gonna drive you. I don't know.
yeah. The surveillance state, the social, credit score is a real scary thing in China. So
Yeah.
you don't comply with their mask mandate and they control your bank account. They fine you with no due process, right? So that's where
Yeah.
that leads to, and that's a scary thought.
And they'll put your picture up on a billboard, an electric billboard on the corner of every street. And they'll show the whole town that, you know, Travis didn't wear his mask for 3 minutes while he was walking by himself on the road, and watch out for this scary individual, and they do that. They use public shame
Yeah.
and humiliation. And then the
Uh,
suicide rate goes up, and it's just, I don't know. It's an interesting topic.
yeah. Let's switch gears a little bit to travel and exploration. I think you travel a lot, right? I know you've been in part of some different groups like the Explorers Club, the Royal Geographic Society. Why is travel and exploration important to you?
I just always loved to get out of my comfort zone. And growing up, I wasn't real comfortable. Like I said, I had a stepdad who he was pretty gnarly. And by the time he left, my mom finally divorced him when I was 12. And so when I was like 12 and a half, I had the opportunity to go down to Phoenix and meet an aunt that I'd never met before. My aunt's husband's sister, who I just kind of met once actually. Went down and stayed with her and went to Sedona and was in the sunshine in February, which we didn't have in Salem. Oregon, and I just fell in love with travel. It was escapism. It was a way that I could get out of my normal existence and kind of choose my own adventure, and I could be somebody else. I could take on new challenges that I wouldn't necessarily back home. And then when I was 14, started traveling to the Virgin Islands on my own. This is well before 9/11, and you could just put a kid on a plane, not tell anybody. I'd just go that way, go east. And it just, this sense of self, reliance, and just, I can take care of myself. I got this, if I lose something, that's on me. I can't blame anybody for my mistakes or my shortcomings. Just always loved it. And then working as a waterman, I was doing boating and diving. We had very real seasons, and it was busy in the winter, and we'd make a lot of money and we'd spend a lot of money, but we'd save a lot of money also. And then in the summer, like carte blanche, where do you want to go? Well, typically somewhere that was warm and had water that I could go diving in, or I could maybe, work as a boat captain for a little while and make enough money to stay, or I'd meet somebody who'd own a dive shop and I'd stay in their back room and dive for free room and board. And I just love meeting new people and hearing about their culture and their experiences. And I found that realistically, we're all the same. We're all one, like
Hmm.
I've been to some pretty sketchy back alleys in third world countries, and I don't really feel scared because I just know that, like, I'm going to be okay. I can handle this. I'm not going to do anything too stupid, but also, like, they're just the same as I am, like they want the
Hmm.
exact same thing I do. We all have a junk drawer, and, we're all very similar.
Yeah, I grew up in a military family. My dad was in my entire childhood, so we moved. I counted one time, but I've moved something like 20 times in my life, and then obviously I served myself for 8 years. So, but the thing that it does is it expands your perspective, and you're absolutely right. You realize we are all one, and everyone has similar experiences and struggles, and it just gives you a better worldview and expanded perspective. And I think the theme that you keep coming back to several times now is that it's all about learning. You have a love of learning, a lifelong learner, and to me, that's really just the purpose of life is learning as much as possible, being the best version of yourself that you can be. Um, so yeah, that's kind of my perspective on it.
I completely agree. I think the more we learn, the more we expand our consciousness, the more we can learn. And when we grow, uh, the more we can do, the more we can accomplish, the more we set out to set goals and accomplish goals. And I, like I was really curious, are we going to war with China? And so I went to China to go find out. And the people don't want war. People on the streets don't want war, just like we don't want war here in America. Then I went over to Korea to see, are they really shooting missiles? Yeah, they're really shooting missiles, but they don't want war. The people don't really want war. Uh,
So
and
I was over there for 9 months, South Korea, and while I was in the military, so I had a lot of security briefings, stuff like that. Like North Korea's capabilities are militarily are extremely low. I
yeah,
mean, they can destroy Seoul for the most part. They have something like 1 million pieces of artillery pointed at Seoul, but they're 30 days and they're done. They can't resupply their troops. They have no food. They have no ammo. They have no trucks. They have something like 300 miles of paved road in the whole country.
yeah,
And
yeah.
it's only in the places that they'll allow you to see, right? And then I
Right.
learned that the South Koreans, they're they want to be reunited with their family. Basically, they see themselves as one, Korea. They don't see themselves as separate. They want to be reunited with, and there's still families there that have been torn apart and divided, and so it's interesting when you actually go to those places and feel and see. what it's like for yourself rather than just what you could learn online or through the news.
100%, 100%. And you realize that what you get on the news and in the media is not accurate. And what is a big deal here is not a big deal over there, and vice versa. What we make a big deal of here is, or what is not a big deal here is a very big deal in other places. I remember I was in London reading the paper one day, and there was this huge article about whatever conflict it was, and it was really going into a lot of detail of what was happening. And then I flew back to the States the next day, and a few days later I was looking at the paper. The same topic was just a tiny little brief little thing in like a, the world section, and each of them was less than a paragraph. And I realized, like, wow, this is a really big deal for a lot of people. And it's really not a big deal for other people. It's just, how are the spin doctors spinning it to make it a big deal or not a big deal? And so why get wrapped up in a big deal or a little deal if we don't know the whole truth? Like, is Russia really our enemy? Is China really our enemy? Is China really going to take Taiwan? And then if so, like, what are we going to do about it? We're going to have marches and parades, and we're going to wear little banners and flags and pins. And what's that going to do? I just respect the military so much, because you guys are the ones that actually go there and you show up, and you're protecting America. It's a strange time we live in. I try to stay optimistic, but man, it's a wild, wild time we're in.
It's definitely frustrating trying to find the unbiased news because I think a lot of people are waking up to the fact that the mainstream media is essentially propaganda. It's just the most manipulated source of information out there, and it's got an agenda, and it's not to give you relevant, unbiased, good information. It is to support their agenda. So I think people are waking up a lot to that, but then it's still, you kind of have to synthesize and piece together the truth is, and what is the truth. I mean, it's it's hard to tell most of the time.
It's time consuming trying to average out and figure out, okay, this agency said this and that person said that, and what are their motives? Who's paying them to do that? And I also, for business people, studying propaganda is critical. I mean, you have to push propaganda if you're going to sell a product. And it's, propaganda is kind of a unique word that kind of has negative connotations to it. And a lot of people hear propaganda and they think, oh, you're trying to manipulate and brainwash people. Well, yeah, kinda. I mean, that's kind of what it is. It's informing, but it's also sales, and you have a agenda, and you want other people to get on board with your agenda and go your way. Well, is it China is a bad guy, or is it drink more water? And how would you do that propaganda in a good way to help people versus scare the hell out of them? And yet, if you don't scare them, then people don't move as quickly, and they don't react as quickly, and they don't buy your product as much. And if there's not a little bit of scare tactic there too. And so walking that line of not being a fear monger and not manipulating people in a bad way, but also encouraging them to learn more and partake in your product is a fun challenge, I think.
Yeah. So what are you working on now?
Well, I don't know. I do a lot of consulting. I do private consulting for people and for companies, a lot of startups. TravisRosbach.com, or I'm on LinkedIn, Travis Rosbach, Rosbach. But I want to start another big company, and I have a couple in mind, and I'm just kind of waiting a beat to get ready. But I have some big things in mind, but I'm also very open. I'm always open for people to say, "Hey, check this out," and I love just doing cool stuff.
Yeah. Any things you're mulling around that you might take on?
Well, actually, ironically enough, tomorrow night I'm going to dinner with some people, and we're going to have a conversation about doing something that, if it works, I'll definitely let you know, Ryan, and I'd love to come back on and tell you about it. But uh, I need big projects, or else I get bored. I'm doing logging right now. I learning about silver culture and how to take care of a forest, and so I'm taking out the noxious weeds called junipers and letting my ponderosas grow. And that keeps me busy. And there's just a little bit of, fear of death, which I enjoy. It keeps me on my toes and keeps me sharp. And yet I want to get back in the business arena.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd love to have you back on in the future. This has been great. Learned a ton, and appreciate your time and all the feedback and information. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Do you mind answering a personal business consulting question?
Yeah, for sure.
I so I obviously doing this is kind of a part-time thing for me. It's just something that I've, feel like I've been called to do. I've gotten a lot out of other podcasts, and I think that sharing information is the way to go. I think, I grew up in a very controlled environment, and I think things, even if they're right, are forced, cause trauma, and ultimately don't get the results that you're trying to force on people. You can't. I think we got to realize that 8 billion people, there's 8 billion individuals. We can't lump people into all these categories of you're here, 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 and everything like that. So I think as a society, we need to realize that and just be the good example, be the light or the flame that lights, the next candle, and not forcing like politics. You can't, the left can't force their ideas right or wrong on everyone, because it just causes trauma, and then that causes more problems for people in the future. But anyway, I'm doing this. I got out of the army. I started selling. I got my real estate license, started selling homes, and that wasn't too fulfilling or rewarding. I'm more interested in the investment aspect of real estate. So got my master's in real estate development, started working for a apartment developer, did that for 2 years, but corporate world is just a horrendous place. I hate it. Um, people are just drones getting through their life with this little carrot dangling in front of them as incentive that there's something bigger coming for you, but just not yet. So anyway, I always wanted to get back to my entrepreneurial side and working for myself. So got out of that, built a real estate consulting business where I consult uh, smaller developers on their projects. I act as the owner's rep for these developers, out of state developers that are doing projects here in Arizona, project management type work, but also pre-development feasibility analysis, financial analysis, services like that. So I basically launched this business in January, and I'm at the early stages. So what would you say is something I should be focused on, or next steps that I should be taking to grow this business?
Well, I, um, the first thing that I kind of get is that even before you start to think about or go towards growth, I would almost I would almost work in inverse of tradition, in that hustle culture, in that sort of hustle, grow, bigger, better. I would almost do the inverse. I would start at the fundamentals of the concrete roots, just get really strong roots, like really learn as much as you can about what you're doing. Learn the history, learn the tradition, learn who your forefathers in this arena were and how they did things. Learn about the old timers and learn about how they did things, and make sure that you have that solid foundation. And what that will do is ultimately later on, when these new kids are coming in and they're in the same uh, arena as you'll find that they have a very Machiavellian rise where they rise really quickly, but then they fall really quickly because they had no stable roots underneath of them.
Mm.
And so I'm a big advocate for just being like, you have to embody what you're doing. You have to be that person through and through. You now are no longer Ryan. You're now your business. And it has to be just part and parcel. Every t-shirt you have, every shirt you have, every notebook you write in, it has to have your logo, your vehicle and you drive is a reflection of your concrete roots, your long history. Even though you started in January, that like that really means nothing to anybody, because if you've been doing it since 1978, people think, oh, you've been doing it forever and you don't know what you're doing, or oh, you don't know the new ways and yet you just started. No, you don't know the old ways. So if you can learn the old ways and the new ways, and you can just constantly keep up with how it's growing, but at the same time, don't go chasing those rabbits. The squirrel will come along and, hey, if you market it, with this, then you're going to be, that's how everybody's doing it. Yeah, be slow to go and do what everybody else is doing. And again, that kind of goes back to, what did your forefathers in the industry do? What are those tried and true principles that, maybe it is radio, maybe it is newspaper, where everybody else is going, oh, you need better SEO and you need this and you need that and you need the other. Do you? Or do you maybe need to take a step back and say, who is my avatar? Who is my ideal client? Who is the person? Who do I serve? How do I give more value to the person that I'm serving? Who is your boss? Your boss is your client or your customer. How do you give them more value add? Well, knowing the history, even just that knowledge base, can be a gift to your clients. And I would, and again, I like with Hydro Flask, our first building that we had, I call it the world headquarters. And people laughed and laughed and laughed. Oh, the world headquarters. Ha ha ha. You sell at the Saturday market, Travis. Portland isn't international. Yeah, but watch, and sure enough, about 4 months later, we have an order in South Korea. Okay, now look, what is it? It's the international world headquarters of Hydro Flask, and so, but from day one, just always have that presence of being a big, long lasting, well established, deep roots, thick concrete roots. And when you embody that, when that becomes who Ryan is, that will silently show up with you everywhere you go. And people will feel it. They will feel that, Ryan knows what he's doing. He just has a sense of, you get a sense of, knowledge to this guy. And it doesn't matter how long you've been doing it, or, how, you're doing it different or better than anybody else. Stability is a big thing. And, because when you think about a high ticket item like a home or a subdivision or a big project like that, there's a lot of money. What happens with big money? Big emotions. And it's scary. It's terrifying. And it's exhilarating. It's exciting. And the possibilities are endless. But I think that what I'm hearing anyway, what I'm getting, I guess, is you need to be that stability in the good times and in the bad times. You need to kind of, and you have that kind of stoic presence already, I can feel. So if you kind of take that stoicism and just build up a foundation of knowledge, and then that knowledge will convey as trust. And when people trust you, when it is a bad time and Ryan steps in a bad time, they'll look to you as the leader, and then you can more easily guide them towards safety. And I don't know, that's just kind of what I hear. I call it my idiot savant mode. I kind of like just start channeling for
No,
business.
I think it's right on, because the way I grew up, and moving every 3-4 years, I built in some kind of coping mechanism with relationships where I I I really wanted deep relation. I value deep relationships. I hate superficial relationships, but I didn't have deep relationships because I self sabotaged them because I didn't truly know how to have a deep relationship because I was always going to leave. Something was always going to end. And until recently, I think in my industry, it's all about relationships. And I've really taken on that. I'm in one place. I can actually build relationships and build roots, and it's not going to end. Even now, we're all connected globally. So, um, growing up, I didn't have a best friend. I don't have any friends from childhood.
Yeah.
I moved my senior year of high school. So I went to that other school for middle school and high school, and I don't even graduate with them. I graduate with some new class, so I really had to, I know that I can build deeper relationships and that, I'm not going to be hurt by that. And that, so I think that resonates with me, what you said of growing roots and stability and all that.
Yeah, and I very much has had the same thing where at 18 and I was in the Virgin Islands and people would come down for 2 weeks on vacation and we get to know them really well and become great friends and then they were gone. And then we'd have new people for 2 weeks and then they were gone. And traveling all over the place, I'd meet great friends and then they're gone. And so and with you, I'm getting also that like you have to and with me also I need to remind myself this that just because we have had that same similar experience where they're here, they're gone. I'm here, now I'm gone. People don't last has been the mantra of our lives. But that's not necessarily other people's mantra. Other people have
No,
mantra of stability and people are here forever. So I one thing I hear for you is when you do have that when you have a thought of, oh, I have a client who I like, and I've now known them for 3 months. Isn't that amazing? That's a long time. And when that happens, as soon as you have those little moments of, holy shit, I'm safe, and I've known this person for a minute now, take a moment to feel how that feels inside of you physically and feel where it feels good or feel why you enjoyed that. And then also the other thing I would do was step 2 of that would be figure out how can you convey gratitude towards that person. Can you just send them a quick message and just say, hey man, I was thinking about you. Just want to make sure you're okay. If you need anything, give me a call. How do you put together a little package with a new notebook that has your logo on it, a nice new pen, and a little, hey man, just thinking about you. Hope all is well, and put that in the mail and send it to them because there is a very real connection that you are starting to foster this relationship. And if you are the person who is, making money in charge of that relationship, it's kind of up to you to express your gratitude back to those people. And whether they expect it or not is irrelevant. But when they get that little bit of a, oh, wow, that's weird. Ryan just sent me something. What is it? They open up the box and it's this nice notebook with a nice pen and a nice thank you note in it. Wow, Ryan, cheers, man. That's really cool. I appreciate that. And
yeah,
it might be 6 months, it might be 12 years, it might be 18 years, and they come back and they bring you on the biggest investor you've ever met, and you make more money than you've ever met 18 years after you sent out that care package and you forget about it. But you're growing those roots. That's how those roots are getting stronger, is by doing little things like that. And you have to act quickly. As soon as
mm,
somebody comes in, and not artificially, like don't overthink it, but when you're washing the car or you're getting lunch, if you hear somebody's name or you have a vision of somebody or something going on, and you have to take that quick moment and reach out to them, because that can be the exact moment where they're thinking about you, or where they're thinking about, hey, if I had a person who could fill in this blank, I would be so much better. And so would that person. Huh, who could fill in this spot? And then, oh, hey, oh, Ryan's here. Oh, hey, Ryan, what's up? Oh, hey, by the way, Ryan, look at this. And chances are you've picked up on that. And that is a very real thing. It really does happen. Act boldly and unseen forces will come to your aid. And it can be just as simple as a text message. Hey man, just thinking about you. If you need anything, let me know. I'm always here for you. Well, actually, I do. I need a new person to run this operation for me. Or, hey, I have some clients who I want to pass along to you. And
Mhm.
so I think that's kind of starting out. You're right. It's relationships and it's not instant gratitude. You're not instantly going to get a payout from, taking somebody out to dinner. It might be 3 years from now that they finally pay that back. And it might not even be them paying it back. It might be somebody completely random out of the blue, but you're building your karma points. And that's never a bad thing.
No, I believe that wholeheartedly. I mean, I've gotten into the spiritual world. I feel like I've gone through my dark night of the soul, had some tough times the last couple years, few years. But since I've been learning and growing, I've more and more synchronicities in my life, and that's right on what you said about you're been thinking about someone, and they give you a call or a text message. And Michael Jackson was that same way, where he'd wake up at 3 a.m. with an idea for a song, and he's like, "No, we got to do it now, because if we don't, Prince is going to get it." Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
no, I'm
Exactly.
on the same page there. And then I have experienced success in growing relationships, building relationships. Like I said, I never had a best friend growing up, or I've never been a best man, or I just was never able to actually grow relationships that deep to be that person to someone else. But my best friend out of my master's program recently asked me to be his godfather to his daughter. um, so that was a big moment for me,
Yeah. Well,
because
yeah.
he's like, some of my family members, they're godparents, but they grow apart or never see them. But he's like, I feel like you're going to be in my life for, you know, a long time. So that's that let me know that I'm on the right path.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the other thing you do have to watch for is you have to watch during those synchronicities. You have to watch for, okay, and how I've learned, and I have to keep reminding myself it's not always easy, but when those synchronicities do happen, and when those little tiny wins happen, it's important to take them and feel that and feel how you feel when you feel good about that. Like how do I physically feel? Where in my body do I feel good when this happens? Because life will beat the absolute living fuck out of you repeatedly. And just when you think it's bad, it's going to come along and kick you in the teeth a few more times just to make sure you know it's bad. And sometimes the only thing you have is the memories of when it was good. And so when it is good, you have to really hold those in your person. And then when it's bad, same thing, understand and realize, okay, this is bad. Where do I feel it? Okay, yeah, I acknowledge it. I recognize it, but now it's time to go. I'm moving on. I'm moving back into good times. And as far as having a best friend goes and a best, having, I've found that, something that not a lot of people talk about with entrepreneurship is that it's very difficult to maintain relationships. It's very, very difficult to have friends and even family members who will really support you along the way. And that was something that, like, the day after success, uh, the bad guys came out of the woodwork and the good guys kind of crawled into the woodwork. And hey,
They,
where'd all my friends go? Oh,
they
well,
want you to be successful until you're more successful than them, and then
exactly. And then fuck you for getting successful. Why would you get so successful? We're not a successful family. We don't have success in our neighborhood. Like, just because you're in this business park doesn't mean that you need to be the most successful in the business park, Travis. And I did not
and
expect that.
and when you're growing, moving up levels, you leave those behind that aren't growing, and you move into a new level, and
Yeah.
there's levels and levels that you didn't even realize were there under even understand. So
Absolutely. And the more you know, the more knowledge you get, the bigger your knowledge base gets, the more these doors open up and you walk into these new rooms and you go, holy cow, all new people. Okay, no problem. I've been here before. Not necessarily with these people, but I've been in a new room before. I know what to do. And, it's not faking it. You're actually really knowing how to interact with these people in this room, even though they're brand new. And and then you learn those people and those traits and those characteristics that it takes to really succeed in those rooms. And what are the best people in those room doing? What are the most successful people in the room doing? Well, I'm going to do that too. And I'm going to do it my way. I'm going to do it a little bit different, a little bit better, a little bit, more uniquely. And then pretty soon,
authentically, yeah.
authentically, absolutely. You keep that authentic, that authentic, be fucking authentic, and people will never see such a thing. Nobody really does it that way. And yet, hey, here's another door. Why don't you go check out what's in there? And you go through that door and holy cow, you just leveled up again. And if you can just keep leveling up with knowledge and building those relationships and also having to cut people, that's difficult. You have to cut the people who are holding you back. And it can be family member, and that can be, very, very disheartening to have to cut family. It could be a spouse, it could be a loved one, it could be a neighbor, it could be your best friend down at the pub. Whatever it is, you have to make sure that you're soaring with the eagles, or else you're going to find yourself scratching with the chickens. And it's not easy to soar with the eagles, but my God, is it much nicer? The air is so much cleaner up there.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's great advice. I really appreciate that. Like I said, really appreciate your time and getting to know more about you. So love to talk further and hopefully I've been wanting to go to the Bend area. So I'd love to meet you if I ever get a chance to get out there. So
Yeah, for sure. Come on up. I'm down in Arizona, every year, at least once, it seems, for some odd thing that pops up. And here I am in Phoenix or Scottsdale. So I'll look you up if I get down there first. And yeah, do the same when you get to Bend.
yeah, love to. Well, have a great rest of your week and I'll let you know when I'm behind like 6 episodes I've been focused on the real estate stuff. So I've got a bunch of podcast stuff to work on. So I'll let you know when I get it out. And yeah, it's been great.
Sounds good. I appreciate it. It was great meeting you, Ryan.
Yeah. Like I said, just appreciate your time and who you are. So thank you.
Cheers. Thank you, Ryan. Take care.
All right. Thanks. Bye.